Hello everyone, my name is Connor and I'm a sound designer for A Shell in the Pit, and today I wanted to go through the Storm Siren from Pacific Drive. The Storm Siren is a sound in the game that triggers when the storm starts to close around the player. And the source or the conceptual inspiration for this is a real life air raid siren that you could hear in the real world, but there is a challenge that comes with this. Legally, we are not allowed to play these types of sounds. So our challenge and our goal was to create an air raid siren that is unique to the world of Pacific Drive, but also communicating that kind of intentionality or that vibe that you typically would hear, that sense of danger, that sense of urgency. So what I wanted to go through is breaking down this sound, right? Kind of talking about it at a high level and showing you how it was made. So we're going to have a listen to it. We'll first start with the yellow version, which is the less intense version, and then the red version. So let's have a listen. Okay, and now the red version. All right, so those sounds are kind of split into two categories. I would consider the real source material and then the synthetic source material. So let's just start with the real source material, which is what I would consider the most tangible, things that make it feel grounded in the world. Now, what's challenging about this sound is that it is distant to the point where it doesn't necessarily have location. So in terms of playing it around the character, I think it's played 2D on the character, meaning that it's not actually placed in the world in some specific location, it's just played. So we have to communicate urgency with this sound, but also we have to tell a story with the sound at the same time. And that's very hard when you don't have any visual reference to go off. The first part that I kind of approached was looking at this real source material. So let's have a listen to it. So the story in my mind that I was trying to tell was that these speakers turn on, they play the pre-recorded message, in this case a siren, and then it turns off. It first started with radio sweeping sound that I recorded on like a older radio as I'm kind of searching through the channels and whatnot. So let's have a listen to this, and I'll try to turn it up a little bit. And what you'll notice as well is that during this section here, I've kind of lowered the level a lot by 12 decibels on this sound. And that is so that when the synthetic stuff does happen, it takes the stage, so to say. The next sound is this one. And this is by a guy named Axel, who contributed to the Sci-Fi Crowdsource project a few years ago. So that's how I came across this sound. But the reason I chose this sound is because it has this alien nature while also having the characteristics of like radio chatter as well. In the world of Pacific Drive, all of the world is alive as much as the character. By giving that kind of alien nature to the radio communications as well, just reinforces the world and the storytelling that we're trying to kind of put forward. Then we have the kind of turning off and turning on. Right, pretty simple. And then the last element, I know it's not quite real, it's the synthetic kind of foghorn sounds. What they're trying to do is they're trying to communicate urgency to the player. And the reason that I chose these is that they're sharp and piercing so that the player will kind of notice them straight away. If I didn't have these sounds, it would be much more dull before the synthetic stuff kicks in. So really what these sounds are doing is like, as soon as it plays, it's like, hey, listen to what's about to happen. So In terms of processing, it all kind of feeds up into this. We need to make it sound distant. So what I used is first of all some distortion to enrich the harmonic content and reduce dynamic range. And then I ran it into a FUTS machine or a FUTS plugin called Speakers by Audio Thing. This thing is really, really great. And I used the Stadium preset. That's usually how I go about using these types of plugins, is I kind of find one that's a pretty good starting point, and then I go from there. But it just so happens that this preset just works. So why not use it? Cool, so it gives that distant feel to it while also futzing it in that way to make it sound like it is coming out of lower quality speakers that would exist in the world. Those plugins really help ground it in reality. Okay, so that's the real stuff. Outside of that, we have our synthetic source material. These were created completely using synths. And what I did when I was creating these sounds is I did a lot of research and watching YouTube videos and whatnot about these air raid sirens and listening to how they're being sequenced. So a typical air raid siren, which we did a version of that I don't think landed in the game, was something like this. That kind of typical up and down fashion. And I'm turning the processing off for now just so we can kind of hear it as it would come out of the synth. Here's the patch that I used for that. Of course, with this one right here, I had a much, much longer LFO shape. But what we did end up using was this one. It's part patch, but also part performed. So it has this kind of like two-stage thing going on, and it is this patch in particular, but I actually perform it. If you watch the keys down here, I think it might be lower in pitch. So I actually perform it in that stage and create this interesting sequence that is like an air raid siren, but it's actually quite different, which is really, really fun. But I made it using Vital, and I use M ratio MB with a bit of tone, pushing the tonal elements and reducing the noise a little bit more, so we can kind of push it into distortion and that kind of futzing processing a lot harder without it sounding harsh, which is really nice. That's how I created this one right here. And in terms of processing beyond that, I used a bit of dynamics processing. So I used some distortion, some multiband compression, and some OTT. What OTT is doing is really pushing the high frequency content a little bit more, like making it a little bit brighter. So I only used it at 27% there. What this is doing is also compressing it before it hits this stuff. So, well, it's not really doing a whole lot, if I'm being honest. Like, if we have a listen to it, that's with and then without. It just sounds more dense, and the frequencies feel more evenly distributed. So after that, it hits the speakers plugin, and it's using the same preset as before. So I'm trying to keep it relatively aligned with one another, but I wanted to keep the processing separated just so that if there was any like additional processing I needed to do, I could do it with this. So that kind of pushes it back. That's really nice. But then I also added some supermassive to really, really make it sound distant. And give it that really, really cool ethereal tail that is really, really fun in the game. I then use this great plugin called Proximity, which basically just pushes a sound back. I can kind of showcase a little bit. So that really makes it sound distant. And I only used it subtly on this sound, I think around -3. What that does is it really helps reduce the stereo imaging. So if you listen to it at 0, it sounds quite wide, but when I kind of bring it down, it will sound like it's moving more into the center. So I kind of went in between where it's like almost fully mono and not. Then we have this sound, which is the... So this is a very, very simple synthetic sound. I have it right here. So it's the same patch. I think I just used some different wavetables, but just going through and picking one that had like the most interesting character. I can't remember exactly which one I used because it's been a little bit of time, but I ended up with this. And it's quite a simple sound. With that processing, it really, really helps this sound. So if I put it off, that's what we start with. But by using that very simple processing and just pushing it back, it sounds quite real, like it exists in the space, which is really cool. So that's some insight into how these sounds were created. And realistically, it's doing the research, having intentionality at the end of the day, like having a goal about what you want to achieve and then working towards that goal. We went back and forth about, what sequencing should the real stuff be? Like, should we do it 3 times and then play the siren? Or should we just do it once, then play the siren? We had some like different iterations of like this kind of starting sequence, letting it tail off into nothing. But we felt like we really wanted to have that kind of start and stop kind of thing going on. We also played around with a little bit of we actually played with some different short sequencing for the yellow one. And it's really just using those kind of same processes that I just showed you with the different synths and just kind of, doing that kind of thing. But I feel like we landed on something pretty cool. And yeah, thanks for listening.